finding brand new recipes that are easy to make and have simple ingredients is not so easy anymore. I was at a yard sale and I found the perfect cookbook for us. When I saw this cast iron skillet cookbook at the yard sale, I grabbed it and had to take it home. I'm really excited to share some of the recipes that I found in there this week. I'll make sure and put all of the recipes down below and also link this cookbook so that you can get your hands on one as well. Make sure you stay tuned for the last one because it made me feel like a total gourmet chef, although it was really simple and easy to put together. Let's get started. I just really feel like this time of year, it's so important for us to really start boosting up all of our meals with some healthy, nourishing, fresh and frozen vegetables. They just really are going to add so much depth and nutrition to our meals. And I was really excited to add these bell peppers and onions to this first recipe. The base of this recipe is Italian sausage links, and I don't really ever buy those. So this was sort of a new ingredient for me to start with. I'm going to saute my peppers and onions in a little bit of avocado oil while I prepare these sausages. They came in like a little casing and I didn't want it to be in the end result of my recipe, so I just removed the sausages from the casing. I'm not sure if you have to do that or not. You can let me know down below. I'm sure that you know better than I do, but it was really easy to work with even though I had removed the casing. Just chopped it up into maybe 1-inch pieces, and after everything was sauteed and softened, I just added it to the skillet to allow the meat to cook through and brown. This was a super easy recipe. One thing that is a definite must if I'm going to use a new recipe, and especially if I'm going to add a cookbook to my collection, it's got to be ingredients that I understand how to use, that I'm familiar with, or at least can easily learn to be familiar with them. And then all the ingredients have to come together really quickly and easily without a lot of fluff or extra steps. I do not have time for a lot of extra steps in a recipe. I know most of you don't either, so I try not to bore you with those kinds of recipes, but this one was a definite win. It was great for a super simple and easy lunch for the weekend, and it's definitely earned a spot in the family favorites category. Okay, next up is a recipe that is not in this cookbook that I just bought, but if I ever make a cookbook, it will definitely have a spot in mine. I love this recipe. It is the perfect fall pork roast recipe, and you have to try it. So I just got a small pork tenderloin. All you have to do is put a little bit of salt and ground mustard on it, poke some holes in the roast, and then pour over a good amount of maple syrup onto the roast itself. I like to use some good higher quality bacon and wrap the pork roast with the bacon. After wrapping it with bacon, pour another hearty amount of maple syrup over the top, and you can put it in the oven with the lid on. Bake it for about an hour to an hour and a half at 350 until it's nice and well done. Whenever it gets close to dinner time, just take the lid off and allow the bacon to crisp up a bit. I also made some fresh Brussels sprouts to go along with our pork roast, and it was a perfect pairing. I just washed them and chopped them in half, put them on my new cast iron pan that I love and will link down below. I coated the Brussels sprouts with a good amount of avocado oil and salted it really well, baked it in the oven while the pork roast was browning, and everything was done and ready at the same time. I love this recipe so much for so many different reasons, but what I really appreciate about it is it takes an inexpensive cut of meat and makes it into a delicious meal that is perfect for even serving at a holiday meal or serving to guests. This is a really good recipe to always have in your back pocket. Have the ingredients on hand in the freezer so that you can prepare a delicious, crowd-pleasing meal that is not only really inexpensive, but also is healthy, nutritious, and very filling. I'm sure that by now you've noticed that I'm using my iron skillets a lot in this video, and honestly that's pretty much all that I ever use, either my Dutch ovens or my iron skillets. I have a couple of stainless steel pots that I use, but as a rule iron skillets and my Dutch ovens are my go-to. I want you to feel comfortable using your iron skillets. It's one of the very best options as far as cookware. There's no artificial coating on them, and they even leach iron into your food, which is really beneficial for those of us who tend to be a little bit anemic or low with our iron. So becoming comfortable with iron skillets is a really good thing for you to do, and it's not a really big learning curve. You can become really comfortable using your iron skillets in just a little bit of time. I love using my iron skillets, although when I got married, I almost threw all of mine away because I felt like it was too hard. They were all sticking and I felt like everything was going wrong. But once I understood the science behind how iron skillets worked and I started using them more regularly, everything fell into place, and I don't know where I would be without my iron skillets. So I hope that this video will help motivate you to get some of your iron skillets out from the back of the cabinet if you haven't used them recently, and start giving them a try, because I think that you'll be really glad you did. Moving on to this next recipe. This is one of my family's favorites. Again, this is not from the brand new cookbook. This recipe actually originated from my very favorite cookbook that I own, the Prairie Homestead Cookbook. I'll link it down below as well. It is such a good resource to have in your kitchen library, and I really appreciate the approach that she takes in cooking and recipes. So I think that you would really benefit from having that cookbook in your library as well. But there were a lot of recipes that were very similar to this recipe in my new cast iron cookbook that I got at the yard sale. So this one is really versatile and a perfect one to have for any meal. It works breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm just going to cook some bacon in the iron skillet, and after it's all nice and browned, I'm going to take the bacon out, leave the drippings in the skillet, and cook up some potatoes, onions, and bell peppers in the same skillet. The nice part about that is this is a one pan meal. Everything goes in the same skillet and there's no extra dishes at the end. So I'm going to cook the vegetables until they're nice and tender, and then I'm going to crack some eggs on the top. Just make a little bit of a well for each egg to go in. You can probably fit up to 8 eggs in this recipe, but I just used 6. After I crack each of the eggs, I'm going to put it in the oven at 350 degrees and let it bake for about 20 to 30 minutes, just until the eggs are good and set. That's all there is to this recipe. It's super easy and super delicious, and it's a really good way for you to get a little bit of practice under your belt using your cast iron skillets. This last recipe is the one that I'm most excited to talk to you about, because I really just felt like I was able to really step up my game tonight whenever I fed my family this really simple but delicious beef stroganoff recipe. I started out with 1 pound of hamburger. I'm just going to brown that, and while that's browning, I'm going to boil some water for the egg noodles. This recipe did come from the book that I got at the yard sale. I did make a couple of changes to it, but not very many. And one thing that the author said was you cannot make beef stroganoff and not serve it on top of egg noodles. So I had Chris run to the store on his way home so I could make sure that I had all the ingredients that I needed. I also had some sweet potatoes in the pantry. I told you this in my video on Tuesday about the apple cobbler. If you haven't seen that, I hope you'll check it out, because that cobbler turned out really good. But what I was mentioning in that video was I'm really trying to be more mindful about using up the food that I have in our pantry and in our refrigerator. In the past, it's been really easy for me to just allow food to spoil or go bad and not use the resources that we have to the best of my ability. So I'm really trying not to do that anymore. And these sweet potatoes were needing to be used, so I decided that they would be the perfect side for this beef stroganoff. As far as the sweet potatoes go, this is my mom's recipe. This is how she always made sweet potatoes when I was growing up, and it's one of my kids' favorites too. All you have to do is peel the sweet potatoes and slice them up into thin slices. put them in a skillet with about a quarter stick of butter and saute them until they're nice and brown and tender. I added probably about a quarter to a half a cup sugar just to sweeten them a little, but that's totally optional and dependent on if your family likes sweet potatoes or just regular. As far as the beef stroganoff goes, the hamburger has browned, and so I'm going to remove it, and to that skillet I'm going to add a little bit of avocado oil, chopped onions, and sliced mushrooms. This is going to be the really flavorful base of this beef stroganoff. I think it's the mushrooms that gave this recipe all of its extra added flavor, and I think it's really funny how even one ingredient addition to a recipe can just really make such a difference. I think if I had left the mushrooms out, it definitely would have been lacking and missing something. So I'm glad that the recipe called for plenty of mushrooms. After the mushrooms and onions are good and soft, I'm going to add about 2 cups of beef stock and just allow that to simmer and soak up all of the flavor of the vegetables. After it's cooked for maybe 5 minutes with the beef stock, I'm going to add about a quarter cup of flour. The recipe suggested that I remove some of the broth from the pan and add it to the flour in a different bowl in order to keep it nice and smooth. So I think that's a really good extra step to take to make sure that the end result is smooth and not clumpy at all. It doesn't take very long for the sauce to thicken, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I added about a half a cup of sour cream, stirred that in well, and everything is ready to go together. What I really liked about this recipe was how I was able to give my family a good nourishing meal that I was proud to put on the table without it taking a whole lot of extra time or effort. I really love finding new recipes that turn out good and that my family will actually eat. It's sort of a struggle whenever you're trying new things and you're afraid that people are not going to like them. I thoroughly enjoyed all of these recipes, and I really think that my family did as well. A couple of these recipes I have made before, but the 2 that were new this week turned out to be super easy and delicious recipes, and I must say that the beef stroganoff made me feel like a gourmet chef. So make sure that you give that one a try. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope that you will do that before you leave today. Also, if you give this video a thumbs up, it would really help the channel. Make sure that you share Homemade Simple with all of your friends and family that are looking for frugal, easy, homemade recipes to feed their family as well. Thanks again for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week. I love you, and I will see you again next time.